One of the things we wanted to talk about was how Christians have responded to video games in the past, like how they've been treated, uh, maybe even, yeah, just generally, I guess. How what have things you've seen? What have responsive you've seen from Christians about video games?
I love this question. Let me ask you this. Did you grow up in youth group culture? Because I didn't really grow up in
Oh
youth group
yeah,
culture.
yeah, I
Okay,
did.
so can I ask you first? Because I actually want to know, like, was playing video games just something that wasn't talked about, or was it looked down upon? Because I can tell you what people said when I was in college after I became a Christian, but I really don't know the pre that era version.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it probably depended on the youth group that you were in,
Yeah.
like, because I remember visiting my friends' churches and like there's a bunch of video game consoles like along the back wall, you know? They're just like, "Hey, kids love it. Let's throw it in
Can
here."
I confess we have some
Um,
video game consoles in our church? Are you judging me now?
yeah. Yeah, really hard. No, I'm not. I think for me there was kind of a mix. Like the we did video games, we had events with video games, especially as we got older and the games got more popular and stuff. But you definitely got blowback, like, and especially more in general, maybe Christian culture. Like, I always had this sense that it was kind of like a time waster, or it's childish, or it's just that's a dumb thing to be spending your time on,
Hmm.
or the stuff about like violence, the association with video games, or for violent kids, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Dude,
You
like
always
I
got
totally
those
remember
those
that though
vibes.
from like the Columbine era, when that first school shooting happens and it comes out that these guys were super into this kind of cult classic video game called Doom, which is still
Mhm.
around, and that was in some people's minds that's what led them to go and do the school shooting. Now, we now have a lot of history between now and then to show pretty definitively that actually video games and violence don't really, in any sort of normative sense lead people to violence. Like there's like bizarro stories you can come up with like a 14-year-old stabbing his 77-year-old grandma because she took away his video game system. It's like, well, dude, that dude's a psychopath. Like it's not video games. Like he lacked a conscience. Something was fundamentally something was
Yeah.
fundamentally wrong there. But I remember the violence thing. But you said childish. Like tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think I definitely encountered this objection more as you grow older,
Hmm.
like into high school and into college. It's like, why are you playing games? Games are for kids. It's like why are you watching cartoons, or why are you collecting toys? Like in that sort of
Mm,
thing, like
yeah.
you need to move on from that. That's just kid stuff. You need to be more about the real world. But what's funny is that criticism was reserved just for this type of entertainment, just for, you don't, you know the you'd even hear it from a guy who spends all Sunday, binging football. It's like, well, what's the difference, and so I think what's interesting, Patrick, I think the conversation around video games very much like was shaped, at least in my experience, from the question about like time wasting, and then most specifically about the violence thing,
Mm,
such that it's like I think a lot of people have just moved on from it. They're like, video games don't cause violence, so what is there to talk about? Like
mm.
the question was, I think, was oversimplified in a lot of people's minds. Like, video games aren't bad, therefore let's stop talking about it. Like, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that there's more to think through with it, and that's why I ended up doing this book, because I was personally I became very addicted to video games,
Hmm.
and like couldn't stop playing. And so my question was not, are video games bad or good, but like, why are they so fun? Like, why is it that I can't like binge read a book for as long as I can play video game? Why can I not even like watch TV for that long? Like, there's nothing else like being fully immersed in a game. Like,
Yeah.
I could play forever. And so like that was the thing that captured me. I was like, why is it that I love this so much? What's that telling me about my heart? What's that telling me about what I was designed for? What does that tell me about like even like the meaning of life? Like deeper questions than
Hmm.
good or bad.
Yeah, well, can I ask you a question? Because the video game addiction thing is a really interesting topic, and so I have two questions for you. One,
Mhm.
you said, "Hey, video games are addictive in a different way than other things," and my first question there is, how much of that is personal to you? Right, like to
Yeah.
you, playing a video game is profoundly addictive, but to someone else, it's a different experience. For them, it might be scrolling on Instagram, or it might be binge watching television shows. Like there's a lot of other things they could easily be addicted to.
Or just hard drugs,
Yeah, or just cocaine, like it's basically
Yeah,
video
just
games or
yeah.
cocaine. No, but seriously, do you think that's because of how you're personally wired? And there's a subset of this question, which is, are there just certain personalities that are more prone to addiction than others? And so they're going to find anything to get addicted to. And so it's like, let's not make video games the enemy. Let's talk about the real thing, which is addictive personalities and your desire to spend too much time on one thing.
No, that's a great question. I definitely think that I am given to video game addiction. Like, I think that there's something particularly in my wiring, like such that if I'll play with friends or something, rare occasions, but I don't prescribe this to anybody. This is just a me thing. Like, I have tried to play in moderation. I don't play games anymore. I can't put them on my computer because it will literally like steal my life. So I know that's a me thing. But with that being said, I also know that the research out there does show that it's a generalized phenomenon. Even like the DSM-5 has a category for online video game addiction. The I forget what they call it. The World Health Organization added something to their documents about it, that there is a phenomenon of video game addiction that I think is very similar to like social media addiction, like the process of needing that like dopamine hit of something new, something fresh. It definitely is a more widespread phenomenon than it used to be. So I do think that some people, they'll play games, never have an issue with it. Other people, they'll be like me and get totally sucked into it. The analogy I use is just, it's like alcohol, for example. I don't think drinking alcohol is a sin, but I would be dumb to not treat it with care, to know that there is a potential, and there may be a potential to be given to alcoholism or something like that. So like that's when I talk to Christians about that, that's how I talk about it. It's like, don't think it's bad. Don't write it off. Just be like, okay, let's approach this with discernment. Let's just think about this. And there's nothing there that could suck you in, the same way you would with any technology.
Yeah. Okay. So this is helping me as we're processing through it. I was reading something it was in a psychiatric journal. It was a recent article, and it was estimating that anywhere, and this is a big number in my opinion, anywhere from 10 to 15% of people who play video games regularly might qualify as having some sort of addiction. But by various standards, I mean, everybody defines addiction differently. Now, to me, that's both a big and a small number. It's like, wow, like that means 1 out of every 10. That's not small. Those aren't low odds. On the other side, I do wonder, is this any different? It's like, here's my constant pushback with people is I know a lot of men who literally from hopefully the time they get home from church to the end of the day on Sunday, watch football. And this is just a part of their life, right? Their wife accepts it, their children accept it. Maybe they've got a son or a daughter who's kind of participating in them, but this is just totally okay, right? Like I can sit here and watch these football games for 6-7 hours. And I have a hard time personally differentiating between that and a guy who goes home and plays video games for 7 hours. In fact, in some ways, I would say the video game is less passive than sitting in front of the television watching the football game. So do you think those are different things, or how are they different?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. No, I think they're both equally, however you want to say it, bad or good. They're both equally, if you're overindulging, and that's something we have to define, I guess. If you're spending a whole bunch, an inordinate amount of time such that you're neglecting your other responsibilities, other things you ought to be doing on any form of entertainment, something's wrong. Like something is wrong. A correction needs to be made. Yeah. And I think that the discussion around video games is sometimes people don't want to touch it because I'll put it this way. When I was very, very addicted to video games and had no intention of stopping, I would use as an excuse for that addiction, well, look, other people are addicted to other forms of entertainment, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but like, that's not a valid
that's
argument.
A terrible
like,
argument.
Well, other people, yeah, I know. So I can do this too.
I mean, like, I'm just thinking about applying that. It's like, well, I can hit my wife because some people hit their kids.
Yeah, that's valid. No,
did you? You go look in the mirror. You say it again, okay, and you see what you get out of it. You know, it's like that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I think you're right. It's like you can't justify. Here's my point: is I guess why I'm bringing this up, and I think you're pushing back in a good way. Is to me, it feels like the more fundamental discussion is what you just brought up, which is about how much entertainment is healthy for me to have in my life. How much does this entertainment form impinge upon my life responsibilities? So that might be my relational responsibilities to a wife, to children, if you have kids or you're married, to my job responsibilities, if I'm working, to my home care responsibilities, if you have a home or apartment or something like that. Like that feels like a more fundamental and helpful conversation than focusing in on video games. But that's why I was asking, is there something different though, right? Is there something special about video games that we need to have a special caution for? And I think you've actually said some really good things here. It's like, hey, maybe there are some aspects of this that are more addictive or differently addictive that you have to be aware of. So can we talk about that differently addictive part and say like what's different about it? And can I throw a proposal at you? I think you are really addicted to video games, or you would be really addicted to video games if you started playing them because of your propensity for productivity.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I didn't know this was going to get personal. No, dude, I think it's actually the reverse of that.
Okay.
So
let's go.
There is a connection. I think I got into the productivity thing because it was almost an attempt to make up for, holy cow, I wasted like the first 22 years of I didn't really waste 22 years. Some of that I was a baby. But I wasted so much time of my young adult years, so much time, just literally didn't leave the house. Like it was really bad, Patrick. And I think some of the productivity stuff was maybe even an overreaction of being like, whoa, I came to realize time is really precious. It's really important. Like I only have this life. Like I need to spend this well. I need to steward it well. I haven't been doing that. Let me get serious about it. And I think that seriousness just kept leading me down to, okay, how do I make sure I'm using every minute wisely? So I definitely think there's a relationship. And but the way I think about it is I think it was the opposite, is me going and running the opposite direction of saying I don't really take my time seriously, to maybe sometimes I take it too seriously now.
Okay, can I push back? Can I tell you why I said this crazy thing? I think one of the unique things that makes video games uniquely addictive, especially particular kinds of video games. So MMORPGs might actually be, that's massive multiplayer online role-playing games. So I think World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, RuneScape, which you already brought up.
Don't forget RuneScape.
It's still around. It's still well played. I looked up today some of the most well-played games. You know, any of these massive, you know, Fortnite isn't an MMORPG, but any of, you know, Call of Duty, these games that are played by a lot of people. Here's why I was arguing maybe that these things are interrelated. Is what these games do is they put an objective in front of you that is challenging enough to be interesting, right? It's not just easy. You know, getting the headshot isn't easy to do, but it's not so hard that you can't do it, not with enough practice. And there is like a joy. I mean, there's a deeply human joy in putting your hands around something and being able to do it, right? Like this is what a woodworker's joy is, to be able to take this raw piece of wood and turn it into something beautiful that it couldn't have been otherwise. There's something about developing skills and using those skills to do something productive. And so that's what the video game hits, right? So now not only do I get the headshot, but I get a score on a scoreboard. I get to compare myself to other people. Or if I'm in this MMORPG, I'm moving forward a quest line. I'm doing the next thing that's down the line. In other words, if you have an innate desire to be productive, to feel like you've accomplished something today, I've gone through my checkbox, I've done all the things. Games really, really satisfy that deep down urge, especially particular kinds of games. And so I guess what I'm asking you is maybe your urges that have allowed you to become someone who's really invested in productivity were the exact same urges that allowed you to, you know, get addicted to video games.
Yeah, no, I think you're hitting on something there for sure. And I do think that's one of the primary, for people who do become addicted to video games, I think that's one of the reasons that one of the things that's unique about the genre is, like, I believe that we were designed for what you said. Like, we're designed for dominion, to overcome, to, you know, when you know, it talks about in Genesis, like God created us to rule, have dominion, you know, build something. So I think that deep down there is this desire in all of us to, whether it's build something or overcome an obstacle or whatever it is, I think we're designed for that. And I think video games latch onto that desire in a very all games do, in a very structured way. A game, there's always going to be some obstacle, some objective, something you're trying to do. But in a game, it's easier than real life. It's easier because the games have to be able to be beat, otherwise no one's going to play them. And so it lays out this really structured path in front of you without the thistles and the thorns and the frustrations of real work. And this is where I think the appeal is of, if you're dissatisfied in your real life, you're not accomplishing things, you don't feel like you're overcoming, you don't feel like you're doing something of consequence. Here's this video game that offers you a way to experience some of that satisfaction and that joy and the reward of overcoming and doing that and feel like, yeah, I did something. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And that's a cool thing. I think that's what makes them fun. The problem is it becomes easy to sort of like trick yourself and being like, well, okay, then I like that feeling. I'm just going to put more of my time into the fake thing so I get more of that feeling. And that's where it becomes a shift from fulfilling responsibilities, doing something of consequence with your life and trading that out for something that ultimately you're just moving numbers on a computer somewhere.